Oh, indeed. At any rate, welcome to the new series, What's Up in Cannabis? And that's the title of it tonight. We might change it. But I can't think of a better guest to have than as my first guest and doing this for the first time, albeit in a hotel room in Napa Valley, California. And I'd like to thank Andrew Samann for joining us. Andrew's the CEO for Orions GMP Solutions. And I had the great fortune of working with Andrew at ASTM on the Quality Management Systems ASTM subcommittee, where I met Andrew and became his vice chair. And pretty soon I was actually working with him at Orion, and we were consulting in the industry, applying GMP and that to all kinds of clients from the United States and up to Canada. And Andrew, I guess, would be my sort of primary mentor into the field of GMP auditing and that. And I learned a tremendous amount of things from Andrew regarding all of that. And I appreciate Andrew taking the time to chat with me a little bit. And really, the nature of the cannabis industry right now is it's a crazy place. And you've got regulatory aspects that are mutually contradictory and variable throughout wherever you are, whether it's in certain states or in this country or that country, and how the whole thing is going to shake out. Well, that's an interesting exercise in viewing, and it's certainly impossible to predict. And I wanted to welcome Andrew and basically just ask Andrew, what are your perceptions of the current state of the cannabis industry, and what's wrong with it and what's right with it, and where do you think the primary focus needs to go from people like us as consultants in the industry and people like us as writers of standards for standard writing entities like AOAC or ASTM? And I wanted to just give you a chance to kind of dance all over that rather long-winded question, sir.
Well, thank you for asking, Carrie. And, I was thinking to myself today before this interview, there are a few people that I know do things right and have a good vision for the slow progress of doing things the right way. So it's a great honor to be here with you tonight. And, I can say I've learned as much from you as you've learned from me, perhaps. So I might start with macroeconomics and say the market will always take care of itself. And those producers with the highest quality products will survive. And there's a lot of room in different tiers in our free market for cannabis, as regulated as it may be, to sort those things out. But perhaps one of the realest problems today is that the free market is doing its thing, and supply and demand dictates what the price is for cannabis, and we see it declining all over the place. Not that it's something that's funny, because there are significant expenses that go into producing cannabis flower, at various levels of quality. Mm-hmm. So to me, my heart goes out to those manufacturers that have taken big investments and work to turn them into a profitable business. And my personal belief is that quality is very difficult to scale without significant knowledge of the process, which I'm sure you'd agree.
Yes, sir.
And trying to control a living organism at scale has its challenges. So, and then at the same time, it has great benefits, because if you grow at scale, it means you're exceptionally efficient, typically, or not. But let's say the greater you scale, the more efficient you need to be. So there's a significant competitive advantage there. So we need to keep this in mind when we think about the clients that we serve, and what is it like to operate? What is a reasonable fee for consulting and improving processes and products where our time, it costs money. It's a real thing. So it's a challenge of where we find ourselves as consultants to make sure that we're delivering good value, um, and that it's something the client needs. And I think that we fit into a niche, both your group and mine, of where clients don't necessarily have all of that subject matter expertise, especially on the front end, because many of these businesses are startups, and they need and rely on consultants that have seen this situation before, or the situation of a startup, to give them advice on where to put their efforts, how to plan their projects, and consider that starting a business realistically, yes, you can commission a facility and start making product, that's fine and well. The first year is certainly a wash when we start construction. Second year, I'm certain it's dialing in a lot of things in the organization. In the third year, you probably got most of the bugs worked out of the system, maybe even literally, where you know how to keep your facility running, what is profitable, what is not profitable, and what areas to start improving more than anything else. So I think that gives a general answer there, and then as best we can as consultants, fill in those gaps there and in between. So there are a lot of them. No one
Yes, there are. In fact, I was hearkening back to, that many of the clients, most of the clients we've had the opportunity of serving. To me, in my recollection, it seemed probably the biggest challenge that we had. Well, I'm going to put that into two parts. First of all, we always went about a process, and we had the operating catchphrase, "What would Dr. Deming do?" And I remember we played in, that idea of Dr. Deming's idea of good quality management systems.
Yeah.
And it seemed the biggest struggle we had was really getting the clients to appreciate the importance of risk management and how that plays out relative to the overall health of the product that they're making in terms of consumer safety, regulatory issues. And I know that we have a long ways to go there. And I was just bringing that recollection back as being some of the biggest obstacles that you and I fought for 2 years as we're out there.
Yeah, it's the funniest thing in the world, because I think this is the point I was making of doing things the right way means you're identifying where the problems could exist or conceiving them before they even exist, and then either putting in a method to control or detect them. I've been very fortunate to participate recently in 17025 training for laboratories. And, when it comes down to it, each laboratory has its case-by-case basis of assessing risks. And if anything, it would do them well to be excessive on the front end and identify where things can go wrong. Because if it's a risk to quality or safety of the product, or compromising impartiality with laboratories, or even measuring something internally, the only way you can really do that is by risk. And I mean, obviously I'm here on video and you've got me recorded, but I would burn all the GMP guidelines in a heartbeat and just go off risk management. Insert things out from there and rely heavily on what consumer feedback tells you about the product and how to improve it. The situation seems simple, but it's got a lot of challenges because it's doing things the hard way, but I think the right way.
And another question I had, and I know there's a lot of discussion in different areas within ASTM and AOAC and other entities, is, there's certain regulatory requirements, and most of those requirements seem bottled in and around ideas of potency and what isomers are present, and which is okay. I mean, I guess it's good to know, but it seems like there's a de-emphasis on things like heavy metal content and pesticide content, and what pesticides and what pharmacopoeia or recommendations are we going to use to determine those limitations. And it seems like there's a tremendous opportunity there, but we're also working against the idea of encumberancing the players in there. Like if you got a small mom and pop shop, but they have to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars to do a full array of pesticide testing and all that, they're going to go out of business. But then by the same token, people will be at risk at possibly being exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to. And maybe you could share some of your thoughts on that sort of overall heavy rain cloud hanging over the thing.
Yeah, so let's say that there are a lot of flawed specifications that are prescribed by, I hate to say it, but by regulators that may have not understood all of the issues with cannabis cultivation and agriculture and how those merge to a product that typically is pyrolyzed. So let's say a product that's smoked. Downstream products from there that are made from cannabis flower, maybe it's a little bit easier to measure what's happening based on their route of administration. But the biggest challenge that no one is really taking the time to uncover for many reasons is what is the maximum daily exposure limits. For example, let's just say cannabis flower and pesticide limits. What's the maximum daily exposure for pyrolyzed cannabis flower that's contaminated with a certain concentration of pesticide? That is a nearly impossible problem to solve because you cannot cover every pesticide on Earth.
Right.
But again, like what comes up in my mind, if I were the business owner, what would I say is reasonable? And I would say, I know all the chemicals that are on my site. 100%, there is no question asked. I know it's there. And then second to that, I know what pesticides are applied around the building. Like we're talking common sense stuff here, right? And then I go to all my neighbors and say, do you apply any pesticides? Okay, yes or no. Great. Probably the great majority of issues is covered in that, sequence of steps. And then you still need to have some of your chemical weapons against pests and pathogens in the grow. You know what those are already, and theoretically they're safe. So from there, the astute student or startup would go about determining what is the maximum concentration they can apply to cannabis flowers, and then assume it gets pyrolyzed. But assumption. Assume you're just getting the full dose, and what's pyrolyzed is not something that's worse than the pesticide in the first place. Maybe you can sleep at night.
Right.
So that's the approach where it would be most reasonable, in my opinion. But from a regulator's standpoint, it's like, well, you haven't figured out what the maximum daily exposure limit is, and maybe that's not our job because we can just say this is a category of risk.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Not much to do. It's kind of like the boundaries we're working within.
And what you just talked about lends itself towards cultivars and agricultural processes. What are your thoughts on the Delta 8s and Delta 10s of the world that may not necessarily be part of a cultivar?
Chemical reaction can make different cannabinoids, fine and well, so it's from a phytochemical source. Fine and well. Safety, don't know. The physiological effect, I haven't seen a ton of research, so it's kind of a black box to me of where
Right.
they're going to market before we know whether or not, we can assume cannabinoids are pretty safe. But the regulatory perspective again would be show me the data that proves this is safe. And then we've got a story. In the meantime, there are some states that permit Delta 8, Delta 10, you name it, as, it was a raw material coming from the cannabis plant and for cannabis flower. It's converted and then comes into some other type of regulated product. Some regulators are calling that okay, as long as they have a certificate of analysis showing that there are no pesticides or heavy metals. Okay, fine and well. So, I'm pretty agnostic to what products or raw materials people put into products to produce a specific effect. And I think that, again, the free market will decide what's good or what's not good. I would question, would there be a market for those other derivatives of cannabinoids if there in fact were legalization federally? who knows? We still have the problem on the market of cannabis businesses are very expensive to run. I don't think they run at the profit margins people imagine. And they're being cut out by the illicit market. So
Mhm.
who knows, what is the right direction there?
No,
And
I hear you.
I,
Interestingly enough, in Louisiana, I can go across the street and I can buy Delta 8 gummies all day long. And now, for those that don't know, Louisiana is absolutely not a recreational state. Like,
I,
in fact, if you're in Louisiana, you do not want to get found with cannabis on you, unless you're in New Orleans, where it's been decriminalized, I guess. But the point is, I did get some Delta 8, and I did look at they had a barcode for the COAs, and all the COA showed was, yeah, this was extracted from a cannabis plant that happened to be less than 0.3 weight percent THC, and that was the extent of the analysis. That was all that was required, and just basically say, yeah, this came from hemp, essentially. Which, yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, obviously, with things that we've seen, that, and fortunately we have experience and deeper insight into that. That's not product that I will be putting into my body, because I am kind of like, yeah, well, yeah, don't know what else is in there. But I think that is a pretty good reflection of a lot of things that are going on now. And hopefully we can get some more standards out there and